So, good morning. Welcome to this webinar from the section on architectural records of the ICA. The section committee, the executive committee, has received various suggestions from its members on topics and issues they consider relevant for further discussion and debate. One of the topics is the production and dissemination of manuals and guidelines to improve the organization, description, and preservation of documents in our archives. 25 years ago, in the same year that SAR was created, we will celebrate the 25th anniversary in the next Congress in Barcelona, next October. The working group had preceded this section, produced a guide to the archival care of the architectural records for the 19th and 20th centuries, which has not been updated or developed in any way. Over the years, a number of manuals and guidelines for archives have been produced around the world, but very little specific on architectural archives. We thought it would be interesting to present one of these manuals, the Riordinare, inventariare gli archivi di architettura, which was produced in a specific content that probably our guests Enrica Bodrato and Renzo Iacobucci will probably refer to in their presentation. So, Enrica Bodrato is the head of the Historical Heritage Management Office at the Polytechnic di Torino. She is an archivist and also a graduate in architecture. She has worked at the Polytechnic di Torino since 1998, and initially she was in charge of the archival funds of the project at the Department of Science Planning and Policies of the Territory. Since 1916, she has also been responsible for the archive section of the Roberto Gabetti Library. And since 2022, she became head of the university's new Historical Heritage Management Office. Renzo is a research archivist and coordinator of archival collections at the Archivio del Moderno. He is a philosophy doctor in Greek and Latin paleography, and he is also a specialist in paleography archivist at in the conservators of archival and library heritage of medieval civilization. He worked as an archivist at various Italian institutions and was a contract professor of codicology at Sapienza University of Rome. Since 2012, he has been a research archivist at the Archivio del Moderno, Università della Svizzera Italiana. So, welcome Enrica and welcome Renzo. I pass the word for Enrica to start your presentation of the Riordinare, inventariare gli archivi di architettura.
Thank you, Antonio, and good afternoon, everyone. My colleague Renzo Iacobucci and I would like to thank the organizer for this opportunity. The book we are presenting today, I try to share my presentation. The book we are presenting today is the result of an online study seminar held in September 2021. This seminar was promoted by Marco Carassi, the president of the Association of Friends of the State Archives in Turin, in collaboration with the Piedmont and Valle d'Aosta section of the Italian National Archival Association. The seminar aimed to support archivists who may find themselves managing the archives of architectural or engineering projects in their work. In particular, this refers to paper-based archives or predominantly paper-based. When we were asked to turn these lessons into a book, we knew that rather than being a manual, it would be a formalization of our experience as archivists specializing in architectural archives, and that we would stay true to the intent of the lessons. Our intention was therefore to offer a point of view that could facilitate an exchange of experiences and opinions. Project archives are complex to manage for a traditional archivist due to the variety of documents produced by designers, sketches, technical drawings, calculations, letters, mock-up, and photographs, for example. For the range of graphic techniques and media used, for the criteria creators adopt for managing their current archives, and the period in which these documents were acquired by the institution that now preserves them. I therefore aimed to demonstrate this variety using some examples from the archives held at the Polytechnic University of Turin to encourage archivists faced with an engineer's or architect's archive to ask themselves a few questions first. So let's take a look at some of these questions. For example, why some fonts consist exclusively of drawings with no documentation relating to the design process? It looks more like a collection of beautiful drawings than like an archive. In some cases, it depends on when the archive was acquired. As we know, the archival interest in project documents only emerged in the late 1960s, and the recognition of documents resulting from project activities as archives is a relatively recent development, as demonstrated by the history of the ICA SAR itself. What I'm showing you now is an example from the archive of the architect Armando Melis de Villa. It was acquired by his heirs in 1994, consisting of 207,060 graphic plates organized into 1,005 descriptive units. The collection refers to architectural and urban planning projects carried out between 1925 and 1961. Prior to offering the collection to the Polytechnic University of Turin, the heirs made a selection focusing on Melis' design work. Melis was also a teacher of our Polytechnic University and an editor of the magazines Urbanistica and L'Architettura Italiana. Along with the drawings, there are 3 diaries that you can see, compiled between 1992 and 1994, which list the selected graphic plates. All documents accompanying the drawings, as well as those produced and collecting during Melis' other activities as a professor and theorist of architecture and urban planning, were discarded. A collection of this type produces a very flat descriptive structure that those who compiled it called a catalog and not an archival inventory. Should be considered the context of the change in terminology for architectural documents in Italy. When describing the oldest collection of drawings, it was said that they were catalogued rather than inventoried. This descriptive logic and standard were closer to that used for the description of drawings and works of figurative art, but not in line with the multi-level archival description. Fortunately, not all ancient archives have come down to us after rigorous selection. But caution is still needed today, because the habit of valuing and transmitting only the visual component of professional archives, including photographs, has continued in recent years. Sometimes, with the best of intention not to overload the recipients of the archive with too much paper, I have encountered donors who have suggested throwing away, for example, transparencies, because copies already exist that have been folded and stored more neatly in folders. I have also come across archives containing only drawings and photographs, as the producers themselves may consider the accompanying documentation to be less important and unnecessary for understanding the project. Also, it is true that attitudes towards project documents have changed, and we now consider them to be archives in their own right. There is still a tendency to favor graphic and visual aspects. Therefore, it is the responsibility of those receiving the deposit or donation to assist the donor in eventually selecting the documents. Another question. Why do some designers use paper as their only medium, while others use tracing paper to create much larger drawings, often spanning several sheets joined together with adhesive tape? I won't discuss the material and technical aspects of graphic representation and document reproducibility in detail here. They are covered briefly in the book. Over time, we know these aspects have evolved significantly, leading to major differences in media, representation techniques, such, for example, the use of stickers, particularly during the transition from the 19th to the 20th century. Here we have a slide with a drawing with stickers. However, there are other more interesting issues that can influence the quantity, quality, and characteristics of documents that we can or cannot find within an archival unit, such as a project for a specific client. Whether the project was implemented or it remained on paper, that changes the quantity of documents as well as the scale of representation. If the project was the result of a collaboration between different professionals or firms, some documents may be stored elsewhere or only exist in copy form. Therefore, we are probably not dealing with the loss of documents, but rather with them being in a different location. If it was a competition, another example, the documents may be marked with a motto and have a specific formal characteristics. Finally, in order to understand the documents that make up the archival unit of an architectural or urban planning project, whether public or private, it is important to know at the time the project was drafted What legal aspects and authorization procedures were necessary to move from the project's conception to its execution? To conclude, I mention two examples related to the last point I discussed in the book. An archivist managing project archives that are not subject to codified document sedimentation methods must be prepared to recognize and accept the sorting criteria provided by the producer, which can vary considerably. In some cases, the original order is similar to how we would arrange a completely disordered archive. For me, for example, chronological ordering is the most intuitive way to think about the organization of an archive, because I consider the progression of project assignments over time. But although this is the prevailing order among various professionals, there is also a wide variety of approaches to archiving. Emilio Clara, an engineer who was professionally active in Turin from 1950 to 214, organized his archive by creating archival series according to the type of assignment, such as residential buildings, commercial activities, schools, religious buildings, and tombs. Within each type, the projects are organized alphabetically by client. And so the subseries is clients whose name begin with the letter A, clients with the letter B, and so on. The various professional assignments are listed under each client's name. Another case in which the original order has been strictly preserved is that of the archive of the Collettivo di Architettura, a technical studio which operated in Turin between 1960 and 208. The archive includes guides such as notebook containing numerical indexes of professional assignments and alphabetical lists of clients. The archive is highly structured. Assignments are organized into series and sub-series. And here you can see on the left the series, for example, L for productive works, N for non-productive works, C for consultancy, and then P for political works, and D for teaching, and so on. Within each series or sub-series, the works are arranged in chronological order. So, archivists, therefore, have two main tasks. First, they must preserve documents in the order in which they were originally filled, if there is an order left. And second, they must help users navigate materials that may be organized in a non-intuitive way. Thank you. Now, okay. Renzo, it's for you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Enrica. Good afternoon, everyone. I go with my, okay. Okay, as we have just seen, the category of architects' paper-based archives is characterized by projects that have been produced on different media and using different techniques. This seems to be the specific feature that distinguishes this type of archive from others. I can go, sorry. There are some problems with the sharing. Okay, this is the PowerPoint, sorry. Okay. For this reason, it is necessary to proceed by trying to preserve the drawings which are are often fragile and subject to damage for as long as possible. With the same level of attention, it will be necessary to keep together in the project description the contents of the documents which are not physically stored in a single conservation unit. If this is an indisputable fact, at least for archives of a certain size, we felt it appropriate to emphasize the importance of working on a specific architect's archive before it arrives at the institution that will preserve it for future historical research. For a general overview, we considered three paradigmatic situations in which we can find an archive at its holder's location. Archives that are already substantially in order, archives in a medium state of order, and archives in disorder. This gave us the opportunity to approach the question of the archive before the fonts, that is to say, the analysis of the private archive as it exists in an architect's studio or in the hands of heirs. This type of analysis, or rather this type of overview, is not an end in itself. It serves as an introduction to present the methods of acquisition and transport of the archive to the institution responsible for its preservation. Using example from the Archivio del Moderno at the Academy of Architecture of the University of Italian Switzerland, I essentially showed the practices we employed to properly identify the conservation units and transport them correctly to the Archivio. The first task to be carried out during the site inspection is to describe how the archivist finds the documentation that is about to be acquired. This survey is conducted on two levels, graphically and textually. Graphically, through a photographic campaign of the place where the documentation is stored, then textually through a description. Specifically, the textual reports consist of a general and informative introduction, which outlines a brief history of the conservation of the documents in question, including the presence or absence of contemporary finding aids, and ends with a description of the repositories. The introduction is followed by a list of the extent of each type of conservation unit. Depending on the time and funding available, each conservation unit may be followed by a brief description of its contents, starting with what has been written or printed on its exterior. We believe that this type of on-site inspection in the original repositories is useful to ensure that the documentation can be transferred correctly, but also to the subsequent phases of archival work, in particular for a preliminary identification of the documents groupings that will form the series or sub-series or files, and above all, to understand the differences between physical conservation and logical order given to the documentation. Up to this point, for 2 chapters of the book, we have been outside the archive in the sense of a conservation institution. In the chapter entitled Good Practices for the Conservation of Drawings and Problems of Document Dissemination, we specifically address the question of drawing preservation and the consequences of conditioning operations. In short, based on concrete examples, we described how a single original conservation unit containing, for example, an entire project, is conditioned into several definitive conservation units. If conditioning consists of separating the various types of documents that represent a project, we can say that in this way, we are creating a sort of a dissemination of documents. In fact, after cleaning, the textual documents will be placed in paper file covers and then in boxes, the drawings in folders, separating them by media with acid-free paper, and rolls. While if we find photographic material, it will be preserved in different boxes and suitable envelopes, depending on the typology of phototype. At this phase of the work, the resulting difficulty for archivists consists even before the inventory is prepared in the absolute necessity of maintaining the common thread that physically links all the documentation pertaining to one project. For this reason, it is very useful to create finding aids which explain in detail and clearly the transition of documents from their original conservation unit to multiple final conservation units. Considering all these aspects, the final step we took in our lessons and in the book involved analyzing the archival description of the project. I started by analyzing the inventories that had been produced by my institution and then compared them with other inventories available in both paper and digital formats. My empirical research focused on the Italian scene showed a very fluid and non-linear situation. Without going into too much detail, in the end, I found two main trends by which projects used to be represented in the inventories. The project documentation divided in two or more series, or the project documentation gathered in a single series. When there are only two series, these are usually represented by projects and photographs. And this is the most common case, which has also been followed for many years by the Archivio del Moderno. But we can find also cases where the project documentation is divided into project and files, or better, to give a more literal translation, into project drawings and dossier. On this same line, we can even find the project documentation divided in three series. In this case, we have the project drawings, the professional architectural career, and the photographs. We can observe how the project drawings and photographs series were excluded from the professional career series. While there is no doubt that the project drawings should have been included in the professional career, with regard to the photographs series, we know for certain that the documents that compose it are also part of the professional career, as we can see in the very brief text related to the scope and the content of this series. To give a few more examples, we can quickly see how the structure of the project documentation can be developed into several series and sub-series, as in the case shown in this slide. Alternatively, in an even more complex way, we can see how the material types of documents, that is, drawings, textual documents, photographs, are grouped in series. In this case, we can therefore deduce that documents related to a single project were treated as the physical form rather than as a unit of description. In general, this approach seems to be due to the misunderstanding in considering the physical organization that the architect gave to his documentation rather than the logical order, which is instead the basis of the individual projects. However, we can also find all the documentation related to projects gathered in a single series. And we can now add that in our lessons and in the book, this is the method that we recommended. In these slides, you can see some examples in which, for instance, the professional career series has been created, including all projects within specific professional fields represented by sub-series. All the documentation related to a single project is then virtually gathered and altogether described in a single file. In the file description, we could find sub-levels in which the documents are additionally grouped. In this case, in drawings, DIS for disegni, in textual documents, DT for documenti testuali, and in photos. We find almost the same case in this other example. Here we can see the professional career series and the sub-series which represent specific professional fields. If we look at the sub-series contents, we find single projects represented by single files. But unlike the previous case, no division into drawings, text, and photograph sub-levels was made. Therefore, all the types of documents that constitute the project are included in a single description. In an effort to further improve this type of description, I proposed 3 variations which I discussed with my architect colleagues and which, for reasons of time, we cannot explore together now. In very general terms, it is a proposal that takes into account both archival needs and architects' requests for more technical information. For example, to understand what type of project is documented by a specific archival fonts. Is it a complex project, well documented with detailed drawings, or a preliminary project with many sketches and few drawings, or a project with no sketches, with many variants and few final drawings, and so on, with various other options? However, to achieve this aim, we believe that both the archivist and the architect should work together to carry out the inventory of an archival fonts. The first one should be responsible for structuring the inventory in all its aspects, establishing the guidelines for the work to be carried out and describing the documents. The second one should be responsible for identifying, on the basis of the original order, the phases of the project in all its aspects, describing the documents in technical terms. We believe this is a proper way to establish a synergy between these two professional figures, the archivist and the architect, who have completely different educational backgrounds. Right now, writing about one's own experience and proposing it to other archivists and architects can probably be a first piece of a mosaic that, at least in Italy, is still waiting to be completed. Thank you for your attention and for your patience.
Well, I think that you give us a very good screenshot of the material, of the content of this manual. It shows the diversity of the issues that you treated, and so it's also a very interesting graphic publication. That means that it's interesting to see, even if our members of this meeting don't speak or read Italian. It's very interesting, the photos, and the graphic design of the book. I would like to say to everyone that if you have questions to Enrica or Renzo, or for myself at all, you must use the question and answer to write the questions, and some of them are yet answered by Enrica.
Yes, I've seen there are some questions. I tried to share my screen to show that it is possible.
I don't think so.
It is possible to download the book. You can download it for free, or it's in Italian. So I have written the link in the answer. So I think you can see it. Then there is a question from Catarina Oliveira. She asked where all the projects in a fund are built, or is there a mix of built and non-built projects? Obviously, there is a mix. In an archive, there are all the projects the architect worked on, and there are some projects that became a building, and many others that remain on paper, yes.
The microphone, sorry, Enrica. You can find also projects of other architects. For instance, projects or drawings received from an architect, maybe to a restoration of a building or other examples. So we can find some projects of other architects in precise fonts. And then we can have other situations. Yes.
Yes, we have here a question from Morgan Wilson, asking if you know the standard series for architecture and landscape design records from the University of California, Berkeley.
No.
As I've seen in the beginning, there's a lot of production all over the world. We sometimes you have probably other publications, other studies that are very important, and that's also why we are here for this this online talk. But sorry, Enrique, you are going to say something.
No, I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm going to
Look for it.
study, yes, to look for them.
Mm.
And it was very complicated for us to study all the
Of course.
all the inventory. So we focused our lessons on the Italian case, and we have said that there is in Italy there is a sort of fluid situation, a very fluid situation.
Yes, and you have another question from Ana Sousa Sote. Well, she asks more about the first phase, that I think about the seminar that you gave before the publication of this manual.
Usually I do some lessons here at the Politecnico di Torino for students studying here, and the seminar we had in 2021 was the invitation of the archival state of Turin, and so it was a special occasion, I think. We don't usually do seminars about this.
But interesting is that you pick the lessons of the seminar and you produce a manual, a book. And so
it was Marco Carassi. He wanted that we put our lessons in one book, and maybe to show our experience. Maybe this is, as I've said, the first step we can do it. If all the other artists who works in architectural archives can write us or can talk about this problem, it is very important, I think, for all the community. I agree with Morgan Wilson. There are so many different ways to approach architecture archives. Yes, it's true. This is true. Maybe in Italy, I don't know, we have a particular history, but for instance, from the inception of architectural archives, I think there was no so big presence of archivists. And then it is very important to create a synergy between archivists and architects. For example, my background is in a general archiving. Before beginning before beginning my work in the Archivio del Moderno, I never worked in an architectural archive, for instance. And then I need the presence of the architects because they know all the technical aspects that we can find in documents. It is very important to create this synergy. And not that only archivists take care of documents, but also, but not only the architects take care of the documents. So we have to stay together. So and we have to communicate.
Yes. Do we have some more people writing things that probably we can comment?
Oh, I see the question of Katie Bowman. Yes, at the university we usually work with architectural historians, and so sometimes we share the way to describe the archives. And about the digitalization projects, we digitize many drawings and documents, and for the Politecnico di Torino, we have a web page with all our archival description. I can read the link. I can write the link, yes.
In the Archivio del Moderno, for instance, I am integralist. I would like to make a digitization project after having inventoried the one font, for instance. We can digitalize all that we want, but if you have not an inventory of the fonts, I think it is not better to digitize all the documents or part of documents. But I think, but I know that it is very important at this day to try to create digitization projects. But it is important to have at first the inventory, a summary inventory also.
Yes, and we need to decide, to choose what to digitize or not, because it's not a cheap project in any situation. And so
Maybe
probably we need to have a webinar on this to discuss these aspects of digitization of the documentation. And yes, Renzo, you were going to say?
We should have to choose what we want to digitize. Yes. For instance, I don't think that make digital all the documents of one project is right for the users. And maybe I need architects that choose what is important for users, the main drawings, for instance, that can give a first idea of the project for all the users. And the users in architectural archives are mainly architects, architectural historian, and so on. But it is very difficult to do this because we have to have funding available, and as in Italy we say risorse umane, human so persons, yes, let's do
yes,
this.
and all of structure to preserve the files that we'll have to keep. It covers this book you have written and the course you have given. It covers more than archival technique. It covers also things about acquisition. It's not only a technique instrument for describing archives. Are there other issues that are not here in the book, but that you think that it should be there now, or I don't know if you understood what I mean. Are there any issues that probably you would like to put?
I think that we always have to make ourselves questions when we see a new archive, when we approach a new archive. First of all, we have to try to understand, and before to find answers, we have to do ourselves many questions. Why is like this? Why is like this? Because maybe it's different from our habits or
Yes.
what we ever seen before.
That's probably part of an answer for Amy Thorne Clark. Yes, that is asking: is there any advice you would give to archivists in architectural practices? Will you comment? Enrica is close to your micro.
No, there are many questions. So I'm trying to. About the question of Balsam Abdul Rahman, we don't have. We have in Italy an organization that is named AAA Italy, AAA Italia, and that is born many years ago, more than 20 years ago. We are all people that manage archival architectural archives, and we meet sometimes to share our experiences, but we don't have a forum online, or the Italia has also some web pages, but also always in Italian, so it's difficult if you don't know Italian language.
About the consideration by Audrey Klaus, when he says, but I feel it needs some more active collaboration between universities to bring these disciplines together. Yes, it's true, and I think it is very difficult, but in Italy, the ANAI, the Italian Association, National Association of Archivists, Italian Archivists, has written the guidelines for digital archives, but they are directed to the studios, to the architects' studios, and I think they are thinking to write the guidelines for archivists. I don't know. And in this project, in this group, in this study group, are present teachers by universities, Italian universities, and other and archivists from many institutions. So, but I think the collaboration between the architectural discipline at university and the archivistic discipline is very important. For instance, in the Polytechnic of Bari, we have done a short master in the summer, in which we talk about architecture and archives from the own point of view. And this is very interesting. And then maybe it will be a new laboratory to go on these questions.
So So quite all of us, we work at archives. We work with the documentation that are given to our institutions. But I think what Renzo was told about these guidelines that are directed to the production of the documents. And that's also an area very interesting and very important because it can make it easier to pass the documentation to the archives from the producer, from the architects to the archives, and it helps to keep more information available. It helps to maintain the preservation of the documentation, and it seems also big questions for some of our that some members of the section put. What to do when we are working, producing the documents at the atelier, and probably we are open to have probably a discussion on that because it's different from the stage at the historical archive. I don't like the word historical archive, but the final phase of the documents, and also because we have also a lot of documentation from architecture in public services and in other that are owned by other institutions and by other people that are not architects, and we have similar techniques, problems, issues with documentation from the engineer, from geographical studies, from geology, from a lot of other areas of work, and all of them they are related to what we call built environment. So I prefer to say that our section is also open to these colleagues from different activities that have some similar problems as the architectural documentations. And we have more minutes. I was.
I would like to tell something about this. What have you just said? Enrica proposed me the word, the phrase projects archives and not architectural archives. Maybe so we can include in this kind. So we have the Archivio Progetti in Venice with Riccardo Domenichini. Yes. So we are talking about projects archives. So we can have architectural archives and engineer and so on. But maybe we have to define, we should have to define this word. What is a project's archives, for instance? And we can discuss about it because we can have some we can have many kinds of project archives. So
yes, 100 years ago, probably if you talk about a project, it will be an engineer project. But nowadays, a project can be of different kind of subjects, and so that's not so easy. But I remember that 25 years ago, there were people at the meeting where this section was created. I was just arrived, being a member of ICA and being an archivist, and there was people from the geography. You know, they have the same questions as architecture with maps, with plans, because they are bigger than the other documentation of archives, and these are documents with scales, and so it was similar problems, and nowadays we have still these similar problems with the software, with the applications.
Yes.
You have the same kind of problems. There are specific applications for projects in this engineering sense, in this architecture sense. So we have another one question. From Julie.
Yes, the question is not so easy because,
No.
of course, we always have problem of space, and we have to pay very great attention if the copy is really a copy, only a copy. Maybe we have a copy with something else on it, colors or corrections, and so this require attention when we have to decide what to preserve, what not. But if we really have many, for example, the isotypes of the same drawing and there is nothing else on it, I usually choose the ones that are best preserved with no the best ones, and I usually preserve 2 or 3 copies, no more than, so we can decide to keep something and to put away something else.
Yes, I'd like to ask people that is writing in the chat of the webinar to put the questions on the questions and answers. It's a different icon, and so yes, and I think there is no, that we are not losing any question. I'm looking at what people have written in the chat of the webinar. So I don't know if there's a question on the chat about grants available to develop archives. What I can say is that the ICA, it has a program for funding projects on archives on this area. So you must look for it on the website of the ICA. And someone is trying to read something more. So Enrica and Renzo, would you like to say something more about this webinar?
I can say that we should have keep in contact. So keep in contact all together, and maybe we can discuss about our problems, our questions. Maybe this is the most important thing to do. Maybe
Yes.
I say every day I talk with my documents, only with my every day with the documents or with the books, but we have to talk all together. So in comparing our experiences, maybe this is the an important thing to do. And thank you very much for this opportunity. And you can download the book, but it is in Italian. Maybe we can think to translate it in English in future. We can work all together with a sort of guideline about the paper-based archives, so architectural archives. I don't know. Keep in contact. So.
Yes, and thank you. And I apologize for my English that it's not so good, but
Well, my English is not so good. Not. I want to thank you, Enrica and Renzo. It was a pleasure to have you here for this webinar. I think our colleagues that are online with us, they are happy with it. I'm sorry also for my English, and that's the first time I have to how do we say, to moderate a meeting like that, and it was very agreeable to look at the book that you have written, and to see that behind it has a lot of experience, a lot of questions, a lot of good projects, and probably some bad ones too. But and it was important to 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 have this opportunity to show to our colleagues, and we hope to stay in contact. We hope that the SAR, the section on architectural records, could continue with some projects, and giving space, giving opportunity to our, not only our members of the section, but also to our colleagues to work together, and probably to share this kind of tools that are all over the world, and probably one of them in the other far away from our country can help us in something in our work. So once again, thank you. I hope to see you in the future here or in presence. And I know that you have an association that will have a congress. It's the Italian Association of Architectural Archives.
yes,
Yes.
Italia, yes.
Yes, so I've been in a meeting of them once at Venice, let's say 6 or 7 years ago, for a while, and that means that you have in Italy a lot of network, a big network working on this area, and we need to build also some networking all over the world, from Europe to Asia to Africa and to America. So once again, thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.